Thank you for coming, everybody. If I could have you slowly make your way to your seats, we'll get started. Beautiful. All right. Can everybody hear me? Is this too loud? Okay. Great. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming to the July 24th CCSE open meeting. Thank you for braving the drizzle. You know, it's not the greatest weather, but it's at least not boiling hot in here like it was last time. That's good. We have a lot of stuff on the agenda today, so I will speak fairly quickly. We have a lot of great people talking, so I won't be up here very long. First and foremost, I wanted to apologize to everybody. I was the secretary of the processor and the political subcommittee last week. I have the notes, and unfortunately I have not had a chance to digest them and put them out via email. That will happen today. The next scheduled meeting for producers, processors, and 502 concerns is Tuesday, August 5th. From noon to 3 p.m. There are 3 separate meetings. There is a 502 meeting, a processors meeting, and a medical meeting. So there will be all 3 of those in sync. I believe the medical is at noon to 1, the 502 is from 1 to 2, and the processors is from 2 to 3. The main thing that came out of those meetings, which I will digest for you right now, the political was split into both medical and 502 concerns. The main medical concerns are obviously getting a piece of legislation in January to codify how medical is to survive with 502, trying to work that out. That's a huge conversation, so I highly encourage everybody who has brilliant ideas to come to those subcommittee meetings. We are drafting verbiage right now to deal with the legislature in January around medical, which is phenomenal. On the 502 end, there was major issues, obviously, with moratoriums, getting better legislation around tax issues. What we're doing with these subcommittee meetings is creating verbiage to deal with this in the real world. So how this works is that these subcommittees meet, these subcommittees adjourn, verbiage is then hashed out in those meetings, and then we basically bring it up to the body whole, just like we're doing today, and then we vote on it like we'll do at the end of the meeting today. So that's 502, that's medical. The Seattle City Council had a hearing yesterday to extend their July 1st sunset clause for all existing cannabis businesses. In case somebody doesn't know, thank you. January 1st, 2015, the City of Seattle put in place basically structure that said if you have an existing cannabis business, if you do not have a state license by January 1st, 2015, you must close. What that was meant to do was to push the legislature to regulate medical. Unfortunately, they are still working on it. So the hearing was held yesterday to give open testimony in either pro or con of extending that deadline, and I think everybody was in favor of extending the deadline at the hearing.
Except for Steve, we were not sure.
Except for, okay, I'll leave that. Let's see. And that was actually about all I have for right now. I'm going to jump into we have a great presentation today from Mark Soltow from Labor and Industry. So give him a round of applause. Thanks for coming out, Mark.
Looks like not everybody got a copy of the
Beautiful.
handouts there, so we'll get out of my screensaver mode here, see if I can remember my password. Well, good afternoon. My name is Mark Soltow, and I really appreciate the chance for the Division of Occupational Safety and Health to be at your meeting today. The message I have for you is the same one that we bring to any industry. We want you to know about our regulatory environment through Department of Labor and Industries, and above all, we want you to understand that safety in the workplace is an important part of operating any business. If employees become injured on the job or develop an illness and are unable to work, it's something that's going to have a direct impact on your ability to carry out the work you need to get done. It's also something that can increase your costs as things go along. So our message today is to, number one, understand the Division of Occupational Safety and Health. And we'll be talking a lot about the enforcement program, which I don't represent, and the consultation program, which I do represent. I want to touch on the financial impacts of injuries and illnesses and how they can impact your business. We want you, based on that information, to start thinking about and analyzing whether a DOSH consultation service, taking advantage of that, is something that's appropriate for your business. Now, the Division of Occupational Safety and Health is housed in the Department of Labor and Industries, and there are a lot of functions that the agency has that we won't have the opportunity to talk about today. At the bottom of this first slide, I've got the web link for one of our Introduction to L&I workshops, and these are offered in Tukwila here in King County, as well as other cities around the state. And at that 3-hour workshop, you can get a lot more detail on some of our other programs, more about the workers' compensation program, employment standards, contractor registration probably doesn't affect you as much, maybe even the apprenticeship program that's administered through the Department of Labor and Industries. So I'm certainly game for any questions that you have after the presentation today, but I encourage all of you, if you're new businesses and don't know all of this information, I think it's a good investment for you to sign up for one of those workshops and attend that. So to give you the information that I want to provide you today, we're going to talk very briefly about the history of safety and health regulation in Washington, how that relates to federal OSHA. We're going to talk about the services that my consultation program can provide to any employer to help them maintain safety and deal with issues that do come up. I'm going to talk about your requirements as an employer. And I did bring some copies of some of our safety and health standards. May not be enough for everybody, but talk to you about how you can access those online. Or if you want to pick up one of my business cards, I'd be glad to get any of our publications mailed out to you. Finally, we'll wrap up with, okay, now that you know about the consultation program, you know about the safety and health standards, if you want to go ahead and use those services, how you'd be able to access that. So many of you have heard of the federal agency called the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, and that originated in 1970, signed into law by Richard Nixon, and established, there was an Occupational Safety and Health Act that established that, and the states were given the opportunity to operate the enforcement program, the regulatory program, at the state level. About half of the states have done that, including Washington. So our deal with the feds is that we operate a safety and health program that's at least as effective as theirs, and they monitor us to make sure that we're doing that. So except for extremely rare circumstances, your safety and health regulation would be through us, through the Division of Occupational Safety and Health. You would not be dealing with federal OSHA. The Occupational Safety and Health Act and the Washington's version of that, the Washington Industrial Safety and Health Act of 1973, provide for safety and health standards that all employers are expected to meet. They provide for compliance officers who conduct unannounced inspections, and they also provide for the consultation program for those employers that want to be proactive, want to make sure they're on top of things. It's important to know that Washington does have some standards that go beyond federal OSHA's that are more stringent, and some of you may rely on out-of-state safety and health information. I encourage you also to check out the Washington-specific versions. The goal of the Industrial Safety and Health Act is to provide safe working conditions for all employees in the state of Washington. It's an act that provides rights to employees, responsibilities and rights for employers, but it all boils down to provision of a safe workplace. The Division of Occupational Safety and Health is kind of it's not really that new a name for WSHA services anymore, but several years ago we did come up with the term Division of Occupational Safety and Health. And our mission, like it says, is to keep Washington safe and working. We want to save lives, prevent illnesses, and protect the health and safety of Washington workers. Now, some might wonder why an agency like DOSH is needed. And if you look at Washington in the big picture, workplace injuries are actually fairly common. Each year there are over 200,000 injuries on the job, illnesses on the job, that are severe enough to warrant some medical treatment and start a workers' compensation claim. Some are surprised to hear that in our state, almost two workers a week are killed on the job. So pretty typical to have 75 to 80 fatalities, or 75 to 100 fatalities. There are a lot of amputations. How people get involved in machinery, get caught in machinery, and some of you may recently have seen in the news the bark blower. There's a young man that was trying to help with that machine, got caught up in the machinery and was killed. So that's also unfortunately very common. Fractures and a lot of sprain and strain injuries. So trying to lift too much weight, trying to use too much force to push things, pull things. Also repetitive motion. Highly repetitive motion can cause sprains and strains. So if you think of the population of the Yakima being roughly 50,000 people, it's almost as if the entire population of the Yakima would develop some strain or sprain injury over the course of the year. So injuries are quite prevalent in Washington, and that's why Division of Occupational Safety and Health exists. We like to think of DOSH as a balanced approach to safety and health, one that provides clarity to employers and employees about what the requirements are, and makes a level playing field. So regulations that apply to one company would apply to, the same would apply to other companies in the same business. Provides for enforcement of safety and health standards. And our enforcement operations, we'll talk a little bit more about how that works, but it's a little different model than you have with the building department or the electrical department, where you get a permit, and you have your inspection, and then you go operate. Your companies might not receive a DOSH inspection for many years. We simply don't have enough personnel to inspect every workplace every year. We'll talk about how you might be inspected in a few minutes. So it's, again, provide safety and health standards that employers are expected to comply with those, and you might be inspected at any time. So when that happens, you're going to need to be able to show that you're in compliance. For those companies that want to be proactive, that want safety and health assistance, we do provide that. We'll talk more about that. We have a lot of publications, a few of which I've brought here. We have a very extensive website that we're constantly updating to provide as much information as possible about safety and health. And finally, we operate the largest free safety and health film and video library in the country. That's another good resource for you to use in employee training as well as your own awareness. So the safety and health standards are kind of the foundation of our regulatory program. And in your industry, the primary ones are going to be our 296-800 core rules and the 296-307 agriculture rules that would apply to the growing operations. There are other standards that many of you may have forklifts, many of you may have a variety of pieces of equipment that would get you into other WAC 296 standards. And down at the bottom of this slide, I've got the web link if you want to have access to any of those online. And of course, we do have copies here today. So what triggers DOSH enforcement inspection? There are a number of priorities that would bring that about. And first and foremost is a report of an imminent danger condition. Somebody working over the freeway with no fall protection, in dire danger of falling off. Imminent danger. It's our highest priority. Second priority is going to be the occurrence of a fatality, or what we call a catastrophe, or multiple fatality in the workplace. Those are required to be reported by the employer within 8 hours to the Department of Labor and Industries, and all of those do receive an enforcement inspection. Serious injuries that involve hospitalizations are also required to be reported, and again, most, if not all of those, will trigger an enforcement inspection. The next category, and probably the most frequent, is the amount of a complaint from an employee, which the Industrial Safety and Health Act gives employees the right to do, or referrals from, for example, another agency that might notice an unsafe condition in a workplace. They'll report that, and our personnel would come out for that. So you can kind of get, by process of elimination, if you operate a safe workplace, don't have fatalities, don't have catastrophic injuries, amputations, if you operate a good safety and health program and involve your employees in it, you're unlikely to have a safety and health complaint. So your likelihood of having to deal with a DOSH enforcement inspection are greatly reduced if you use the tools we have available and carry that out. The next category is, we use the term programmed inspections, and this refers to our use of safety and health data that comes from the workers' compensation system, comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other sources to identify those workplaces that are having the most injuries and illnesses, where the greatest hazards are. And I'm sure you'd agree that it makes sense for our enforcement agency to focus on those work locations where the hazards are greatest. The last category would be what we call a follow-up. And many times when an enforcement inspection has been done, they will come back at a later time to make sure that hazards have been abated. So any questions about what would trigger an inspection? If not, then let's talk about how an inspection would work. These are all going to be unannounced. There will be no advance notice given. Any employee of the Department of Labor and Industries that gives advance notice can actually go to jail for doing that. We don't notify you in advance. So the format is going to be an opening conference where the person identifies him or herself to you, explains the reasons for an inspection, and goes through some ground rules and asks for your permission to continue with the inspection. They're going to do a walkthrough evaluation and other types of evaluation processes to check out the hazards in the workplace and make a determination whether those are being appropriately complied with. There'll typically be a lot of employee interviews, and they're also going to need to review your written safety and health program, your records of training, your records of safety meeting minutes, and other documents that support the fact that you're operating the program correctly. They'll conclude with an closing conference where they go over all of the issues that have been found with you, and subsequently you receive a citation and notice. Now, what happens if the inspector finds violations is, number one, that the employer has to abate or correct the hazard. And there'll be a determination of what's a feasible time period in which to do that. And there is, depending on the severity and likelihood of the injury that could occur connected to the violations, there may be a penalty attached to that. And we get a lot of questions about, okay, what's the penalty likely to be? And that varies tremendously depending on the severity of the injury that could happen and a number of other factors. It can be from a minimum of $100 on the penalty to $5,000, a minimum of $5,000 for willful violations, and certain other categories. So they will look at the program that the employer is doing, see what good faith has been shown, what efforts have been made, and the size of the employer and other factors, and there's a calculation process for those penalties. To give you another example, there was recently a situation where a worker died on a construction site that came out in an L&I press release and was in the newspapers, and the total penalties involved there were, I believe, $85,000. It can be even higher. Some of the inspections at the oil refineries with multiple fatalities have gone into the $500,000, multi-million-dollar penalty range. Okay, knowing that an inspection could occur at any time on an unannounced basis, how can an employer be prepared for that? And first and foremost is to have an accident prevention program. This is the single most common violation, a lack of a organized, structured activity by the company to maintain safety and health, train workers, etc. In order to have a good safety and health program, you need to evaluate your hazards in your workplace. And okay. We do on our DOSH website, and I'll show you this in a few slides from now, we do have a lot of resources on there for companies that don't already have an accident prevention program, want to get started in the process of doing that. We have materials and instructions and sample programs on our website to assist you with that endeavor. It's important to involve your employees in safety and health. They're the ones doing the jobs. They're the ones that have the best handle on what dangers are. And when it comes to eliminating or controlling hazards, they're often your best source of information for how to do that. And we also find that companies that involve their employees in a really meaningful way, that it helps them as a company. They're working together on safety and health. They find that that translates to them working well together on production issues, on other business issues. So there is a spin-off benefit to a good safety and health program as well. You need to be aware of the standards that apply to the processes that you're following, the processes you're using. And again, we've got copies of those. We'll talk about how you can access those online. But for many employers, it's really helpful in the process of doing this to bring in a voluntary consultation program. Every year, about 2,500 companies in Washington use that service. They come from everything from steel mills to construction sites, warehouses, really all types of industries. So the cannabis industry, in some sense, is a new industry, but to us, it's really going to be very much like many other operations that we deal with. We're used to coming in, working with employers, whatever their industry is, however their business is structured, and making that work for them. So benefits of a safety and health consultation. Number one, there's no charge to you for using that. Number two, we don't issue citations or fines. So because the company is voluntarily requesting the service, we take the penalty aspect out of the equation. Our consultation reports are not shared with the enforcement program. We really do have a firewall between the two programs. If you request a consultation, we get started with it and decide, no, I don't really like where this is going, you can just end the consultation at that time. If a hazard has already been found by the representative, we're still going to need you to correct that, but you can terminate it at your discretion. Finally, it's a great way for you to get employees involved in your safety and health program. By bringing in a government representative like that, you can show that you're serious about safety and health, and it really works out. It's a reliable source of information. Although we have that firewall between consultation and enforcement, we make every effort to be sure that we know how compliance is applying the standards, and we would bring that same information to you. So if you hear a rumor from whoever about, oh, I hear that DOSH is doing X, Y, and Z, you can call us. You know, we can verify that. We've got the correct information for you. And a lot of times, some of those turn out to be true, some of them don't. We're definitely there to be a reliable information source for you. And the last thing to mention is that a lot of times our consultants will be able to provide you with information that goes beyond the safety and health standards, but is going to benefit you as a company to operate safely and profitably. So a consultation, very much like an enforcement inspection, is going to involve an open conference, a walkthrough survey, hazard identification, assessment of your safety and health program, closing conference, and written report. Like the enforcement officers, we'll also be interviewing employees as a way of validating the program that you're operating and to help us identify any deficiencies that might be there. We may make a follow-up visit, and especially for companies that are kind of getting started with it, we want to be sure that okay, now I know I need a safety and health program. I know I need to guard this piece of machinery. Come back in and give them the assurance that they're on the right track, or that some additional steps might be needed. Now we have several specialists in the consultation program, and our safety consultants would deal with material handling, forklifts, electrical, fall hazards, general safety issues, but we also have industrial hygienists. So companies that use chemical processes, get into the issue of chemical hazard communication, having material safety data sheets, or safety data sheets as they're now going to be called. Our industrial hygienists can assist you with that. Respiratory protection, chemical protection, and it's a great resource from a financial standpoint too. Like I said before, it's a free service. And that includes if there are air samples that need to be taken, exposure measurements that need to be done that might cost you thousands of dollars to have done through a private party, we can do that for you through our free service. So keep that in mind. There are some obligations that go with the consultation program. The employer, at the time of the request, has to agree up front that any problem areas are going to be fixed. If there's something we see that's imminent danger, you're going to stop it on the spot. If it's less than imminent, but still a hazardous condition, that you will fix that within what we jointly figure out is a reasonable time period to do that. You also need to agree to include employees in the consultation process and to share the results of the consultation visit with those employees. Now, I also want to talk about our risk management consultation. And what these folks work with is the financial aspects of safety and health. When you hire employees and start your industrial insurance account, you're going to be paying a base rate, base hourly rate for workers' compensation insurance, depending on the type of work that they do. Excuse me. And after 3 years, your rates are either going to go up or they're going to go down, depending on whether you've had an above average rate of injuries or a below average rate of injuries. And our risk management consultants can sit down with you and give you specifics about, okay, if this scenario happens, this is the potential effect that's going to have on your workers' compensation costs. They can also help you. Hopefully your programs will all be effective and there'll never be an injury in the cannabis industry, but if there is, then they can help you be on top of managing the workers' compensation claim, and above all, in getting the employees, if at all possible, back to work as soon as possible, or even in some cases using our stay-at-work program to help them stay on the job in a light-duty capacity. All of those things work together to help you minimize the financial impact of injuries and illnesses on your company. We also have ergonomics consultants, and this gets into issues of highly repetitive motion that might cause wrist injuries, shoulder injuries, things of that nature. They'll work with you on lifting tasks that might have the potential to injure people's backs. And they have a wealth of resources in looking at jobs where employers think, wow, this is just the way it's got to be done, and there's nothing we can do about it. But they're very often able to come up with good solutions that instead of fitting the worker to the job, you're fitting the job to the worker, getting the work done without the potential for sprain and sprain type injuries. Now, I mentioned that we have a DOSH website, and we're constantly updating and revising that. Over here at the left, we've got a series of drop-down menus. Top of the list is rules and requirements. So you can always go there for online access to any of the safety and health standards. And in addition, there are a number of rule interpretations that the department has for safety and health standards, all posted and accessible to the public there. Second tab is for training and prevention. And by clicking there, you'd be able to access me or my counterparts in the consultation program, as well as a lot of good safety and health training materials that you can use to help you in your program. We have an A to Z topic index, so if you want to search that by industry, if you want to search that by types of injuries and other factors, it's a great way to access that information. I hope that none of you will ever have to report a hospitalization injury or a fatality, but if you do, the information is on there. We also have the Get Started with Safety and Health button. And this is the one I was referring to before, where it can help you start by evaluating and recognizing the hazards in your workplace and constructing a safety and health program to deal with that. We also have a number of sample programs that you can use as a starting point. They all need to be tailored to the specifics of your company and how you're providing safety and health protection, but it can really help you get off the ground in doing that. We provide training and education, and earlier I mentioned our Introduction to L&I workshop. I gave you the link there, but you can go to our safety webpage and look up other workshops. We provide those on the globally harmonized hazard communication, the new safety and health data sheets that some of you will be seeing from your vendors. We have how to develop an accident prevention program, how to maintain records of injuries and illnesses, quite a number of topics. So typically there's going to be 2 to 3 hours in length. We have them in our L&I offices. They're free. We're also available to bring more topic-specific information out to a meeting like this or a special session. I'll be glad to work with CCSE to try to get that set up. More and more people are doing everything online, and computers, mobile devices, everything else. So we do have a lot of online training there as well. Some of it's simply picture format. A lot of them, more and more, we're going to narrated safety and health training that people can use on site. So a lot of good resources there. Just mention that we push the on-site consultation program and the training. But you're welcome to call us at any time. We'll definitely be available to answer your questions, help you track down rumors, help you with interpretations, and I've got my contact information on the first page there. And I'll just kind of close by this picture from about 1932 from a construction site in New York City. At the time this picture was taken, the accepted reality was that for every floor of construction, there'd be at least one worker who died on that website. That's just the way it was at that time. It was accepted. But in today's environment, things have advanced tremendously. There are solutions to safety and health problems. There's fall protection, there's systems, and really the solutions are out there. The pathway is out there through the safety and health program. I really encourage all of you to use that, take advantage of it, and be successful in your businesses. Now, I don't know if all of you are located here in the King County area. If you are, you're welcome to call me. If not, I've got kind of our little map of L&I offices. And on the last slide, I've got contact information for all of the other safety and health consultation managers in the state of Washington. Myself and all of them, glad to get a call from you. And whatever level of assistance you need from us, whatever questions you have, we're glad to do that for you. So that's my presentation. I'm glad to take questions. Sure.
Is there anything going on in the area of abating environment of payola? I find that pretty common on the East Coast where I'm from, health inspectors and such getting, my brother was a health inspector in Stamford, Connecticut. He faced a lot of payola conditions, which he found very objectionable. Do you have to deal with any of that in this area?
I can say in 35 years with the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, of which about 8 of them were spent as an enforcement officer, I never had that here in Washington. I can't tell you it doesn't exist, but if it did, that would be very serious matter.
Would that be criminal?
It's just something that you hear about it in the East Coast, you hear about it in some other states, but these are people of integrity.
Seems like it.
If you did hear something like that, absolutely report it to the Department of Labor and Industries, because that's not the way our program operates. If there's something going wrong, we definitely want to know about that. Your question?
Thank you.
I was just wondering, as our industry now gets established in the right time too, have you seen any areas that you think are, perhaps need adjustment, or that we in our industry should be particularly?
Well, I personally have not had an opportunity to visit any of the establishments yet. All of us in labor and industries are trying to learn about the methods that are going to be used, the restrictions that you have under Liquor Control Board, for example, the different extraction processes that are allowed in there, the issue of carbon dioxide enrichment, how that would be controlled, and a number of others. And we, as this moves along, and hopefully as businesses in the industry use our services and we get more knowledge of that, we'll definitely try to publish that. I mentioned that our website does have a number of industry-specific web pages, and I would hope to see that kind of information populating our website as we move along.
Does it, have one employee do you need an accident prevention plan, or how many employees, and also worksite safety meetings for retail?
Okay. That's a good question, because any employer-employee relationship does trigger these requirements. So even one part-time employee would kick in the enforcement of safety and health standards, including the program and safety meetings. So that would need to happen on at least a monthly basis in a retail operation. If the level of employment increases past the 10-employee mark, then we get into kind of different structure, the safety committee process that would come into play there. It's important to realize too that from a DOSH standpoint, the employer-employee relationship is one where the relationship between the two is one of their personal labor. It may or may not line up with the IRS considerations. So somebody that you may think of as a contractor and might meet IRS tests on that, but the essence of what they're doing is performing labor for you. we would still consider that to be an employer-employee relationship. It's also important in terms of workers' compensation insurance. Some businesses that think, oh, this is a private contractor, I don't have to cover them. In actuality, they do. And one example is the logging industry, where somebody who has a logging truck, a carter, a big piece of equipment could legitimately be considered an independent contractor and therefore not covered. But somebody that all they got is a chainsaw and they're going out and chopping down trees for you, they're going to be a covered worker. Okay?
Any other questions? Beautiful. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really excited. I've been in the cannabis industry a long time, and having a gentleman like this actually come and address the cannabis industry shows you how much evolution we have really done. So, I mean, L&I is not an exciting thing for a lot of people, but I get pretty stoked about it.
Come on.
We are going to run a little long today, probably an extra half hour. It is 12:50, so does anybody mind if we just power through and hammer through the rest of the speakers we've got and kind of adjourn 20 minutes late? Awesome, perfect. Okay, so next on the list is our very own treasurer and CPA, Mr. Todd Arkley, to give us an accounting update.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Todd. I'm the treasurer here on the board of CCSE. The main thing I want to tell you about is tonight we have a seminar. It's at the Seattle Center. Starts at 5:30 and it's going to go to 8:30. And it's about 280E, it's about banking, and it's about taxes. I will be on the panel. I'll be moderating it. I run my own firm and I work in the cannabis industry, helping people with more of the kind of controller, CFO aspects. We're going to have John Davis, who's sitting right here, is our executive director. He has just an incredible wealth of knowledge about the industry and how to run business as well. Dean Gusky, he's another CPA. He works on the east side and he specializes in filing federal tax returns, so they're compliant with Internal Revenue Code 280E. And really great, we have Carmela Houston, she's the Vice President of Business Operations at Soltow Credit Union. And you may or may not know that Soltow, pardon me, is taking accounts from producer processors right now. But she's going to have a presentation, so she'll be there to give answer your questions that you have about banking. And I think it's really crucial that if you're not aware, that either you show up or you send your CPA there. They can actually get continuing education credit. CPAs need to take so many classes every year. If you have a bookkeeper, if you have an accountant, just have them come, because there's a lot of really basic information that is going to keep you compliant. It's going to keep your business profitable. And and I just continue to run into issues where I ask some of them, especially in the people new to the 502 world, I ask them, I go, you know about 280E? And they're like, 280 what? And you're like, okay, you're going to be bankrupt soon. And the marijuana excise tax. That seems to be one that's causing a lot of confusion for people. We had 2 weeks ago at our meeting, there was a woman here that she is a tax practitioner and she really knows what she's talking about. She had thought that the excise tax was structured differently. I followed up with her, and it turned out that the information she was getting was incorrect. The excise tax, to be very brief about it, the marijuana excise tax, it's a business tax. It's a business tax. It has nothing to do with your customers. You cannot itemize that on your receipts. It's not a liability, it's an expense. And we'll talk about that more tonight, and I'll answer any questions about it right now if you want.
Is it deductible under 280E?
I don't believe so.
Oh my God.
That's John asked, if this tax, which is a business tax, much like the B&O tax, is deductible under 280E, and I don't think so. Dean Gusky, who is on the panel, doesn't think so. This may be something that ends up being needs to go to a tax court, because it's clearly a selling cost. It's incurred on a sale, and there's some if you really want a technical advice memorandum about excise taxes, the IRS has talked about this, about liquor taxes in the past, and they've determined, they're like, well, it depends how the tax is assessed. If it's If it's assessed on production, probably can deduct it. If it's assessed on the sale, probably not. So that's, I mean, that's still up in the air. Well, it's not, in my mind, it's not up in the air, but hopefully we'll see some case that might clarify that, but I don't, I wouldn't assume it's going to. The other thing to mention is that I think you saw in the news, and I might have John say a word about this, but there was an amendment passed in the House about it was related to the House essentially told the Department of the Treasury, am I correct on this, that it was,
Yeah, it's Treasury.
yeah, told the Treasury, they said, we don't want you to use any funds to enforce banking institutions which,
SEC and FINRA.
what's that?
SEC and FINRA too.
Okay, SEC and FINRA as well. They voted to say you cannot use your funds to try to go after these banks that decide to bank the cannabis industry. Now, that's not, and again, stepping if I'm incorrect in this, that's not changing any law, it's just saying we're not going to give you money to do it. And that obviously has to go through the Senate. Let's hope to see that goes through, because if something like that went through, I think you would see a lot of other banks show up. We've got 2 credit unions here right now, Numerica on the east side and Soltow on the west side. So that's something that, obviously I'm very interested in, and we're all keeping track of. I don't know if you have any estimates, John, about whether that's going to go through the Senate or?
I think it will, but man, it's mired down right now.
Yeah.
Committees.
Okay. So that's kind of the update right now. The big thing is tonight, if you can, we're going to be at the Seattle Center. We've got more details over there. It starts at 5:30. It's going to have a 2-hour, it's going to be a panel discussion, so a lot of questions and answers. We're going to do a lot of back and forth, and then we'll have a mixer afterwards to discuss it further, but it's all about finances. So, if you have any questions? No, I'll hand it back to Jeremy.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, man.
All right, I'm actually really excited about that. We got almost 50 people going to that thing, so it's going to be a great way to learn a bunch of stuff and network as well. Moving forward, we're actually really fortunate to have Craig Engelking here today. He has been a lobbyist for the city of Seattle. He's worked with this organization as well as a multitude of others on a lot of cannabis issues, so I wanted to give him a couple minutes to give all of us an update about what's going on politically with cannabis. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, everybody. Well, like you mentioned, I've done some work in the past with the City of Seattle. Prior to that, I was the state legislative director for the City of Seattle for 4 years. Prior to that, for 10 years, I was the state lobbyist for the Sierra Club, where I did a lot of the electoral work as well as the state legislative lobbying. So this past session was my 16th session working down in Olympia. And I did work with ASA on working on the preserving safe, reliable access for the patients. And so we're hoping to be able to continue that work as well, and moving into the future, because there's a lot of, actually, how you work medical and 502 together is a huge, complicated problem. And I think I actually see a path in my mind about how they can actually fit together and still preserve safe access and affordable access for the patients. But it's going to take actually quite a bit of work. There's a lot of moving parts. I've also been doing some work with Doreen in the recent months, where we've been getting in at and helping with the 502 and helping applicants kind of work through 502. And my take on where things are with the Liquor Control Board, and you all probably know this, they're way overburdened. They're short-staffed. They are, they have basically a schizophrenic type of mission, which is to undercut the illegal market, to create a market that undercuts the illegal market and that also discourages use. And so they have a lot of conflicting policies, that make it a lot harder for them. But just to follow up, what you guys were just talking about with on the tax issue, we actually did meet with the Liquor Control Board not that long ago, maybe about a month or so ago, with Randy Simmons, who is the head of the marijuana program for the Liquor Control Board. And they're actually starting to develop some recommendations to the legislature for the upcoming session about the tax structure in 502. And so we kind of walked through with them the implications of the excise tax, the way it's currently structured, and what that means for the federal, being able to write it off federally, all of that, and what that actually means for the actual, businesses economically. So the good news out of that is that we may not actually have to wait for a court case to work itself through. We may actually have an opportunity in the upcoming legislative session to work with the Liquor Control Board and the legislature on making some revisions. So what they're doing right now is they're actually putting together their internal policy about recommendations that they're going to be making about how to change the taxes for 502 to both discourage use and undercut the illegal market. So what that means is that we actually have an opportunity in the interim here for the rest of the summer and into the fall to work with the Liquor Control Board, to be able to work with key legislators in particular to help craft a package that may make some changes to the tax structure so that it could either be lowered, that's on the table, which I thought was really interesting, that they had on the table a recommendation to actually lower the excise tax. Another option is to restructure it so that it would be able to be deducted at the federal level. And then another option is just to consolidate it and simplify it for kind of ease of filing and ease of reporting and all of that. So, but the upshot is that there actually is a window of opportunity here to work with the legislature before the session starts, and to work with the Liquor Control Board. And we may even see if we're able to actually work with them effectively. We may actually have agency request legislation, where they're actually making some significant improvements to it. So I feel optimistic about the opportunity, but we definitely need to capitalize on it during the fall and make the most of it. Also, the other thing that's happening obviously is that we have elections in November that are going to decide who's in control of the state house and in control of the state legislature. The state house is most likely to stay under Democratic control, but the Senate is been governed, as many of you probably know. They've had this kind of majority caucus coalition, which is essentially a Republican-controlled Senate, not entirely, but for the most part. It's actually in play during this upcoming, in November, and so it could actually go, all the way, be totally Republican, or go all the way back and be completely Democratic. And if folks want to get involved in doing that, getting involved in some of those races, competitive races, could help position the industry and individuals, who are participating to actually be in a better position once the legislature convenes in January, to advocate. So that's another opportunity to be able to weigh in. So the other thing I would mention too is, I know City of Seattle is looking at delaying the 6 months, pushing it back to July, but I can say pretty clearly there's no way that the legislature will be able to act in time to do anything, by July, for the City of Seattle to do anything by July. It's going to take quite a bit of time to sort out. Whatever the legislature passes, I do think they will pass something medical. Hopefully it's going to be decent, and particularly for the patients. But it's going to take more than July to get it sorted out. So I'm pretty sure that we'll be back next July working to get the City of Seattle to push that back even further. So I'd be happy to take any questions if folks have any.
Can you elucidate on what you think the path for 502 and medical working together is?
I think what was interesting, medical is, according to the guy that did the consulting firm that did all the analysis for 502, Votech, their analysis, they actually estimate it's only about 20% of the total market, which I thought was really interesting, because you would think from some of the rhetoric that's out there that it's like way more, than that, but it's actually 20%. So I think what you're going to see is something that's similar to what 5887 was last year, where they create a state medical type of endorsement for retail access points, and that the actual patients will have some kind of preferential situation with regards to the taxes. I think
similar to Colorado.
Somewhat, but since we have a different, similar in some regards, but different because we have such
the underlying framework is different.
So it's the same stores selling to recreational on one side, medical on the other.
I think that they'll also have there will be a path to creating medical-only establishments that are state licensed, that will have some kind of a state license.
How are they gonna be split?
Well, I think these are some of the issues that need to be
Okay.
worked out. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, the Liquor Control Board, when we met with them, they were very clear that when they figured out the number of stores that were created, that they were creating those number of stores and the number of canopy that they were gonna license specifically only to the recreational market. And so if there is some kind of fold in from the medical market, that would mean some more canopy and potentially some more stores being licensed. And then whether or not those would be able to just serve medical or potentially serve both is still up in the air, and that's where we potentially have some say in that process early on.
Yeah.
But the number of stores were really designed to address the recreational market only. And so there is this piece of the market, medical, that is not being addressed anywhere in those numbers that they calculated initially.
Yeah, including the canopy. And it was the other interesting thing that we learned is that the way that they are dealing with the canopy is that they indicated that they're just going to continue to increase it as it's unfolding, which I thought was an interesting approach. So right now their canopy is only 13% of the overall market, and so it's a pretty small amount. So what they didn't really indicate was what the timing would be like for that. But I'm guessing it's going to be a while. It's not going to happen overnight.
I was just wondering if you'd heard anything in the background about whether, say, usage is being considered. I understand we're focusing on retail and reducing processing for now, but is there anything kind of going on in the background in terms of, say, considering how people could use cannabis in the state? So whether they're visitors or whether it's at home or other things.
There hasn't been a lot about that I've been picking up. A lot of people have been really focused on the situation with edibles, and that's been taking up a lot of their bandwidth, trying to get around that, how they're going to deal with that. And this is just the beginning. I think what they put out there recently is just the beginning.
Forgive me if this has already been discussed, but is there much to the scuttlebutt going around that retailers got nothing to sell and there's not enough production?
Well, I'm not the person the expert on that, but that's what I've heard. Maybe there's other people want to.
I can fill you in.
Yeah, there's absolutely not enough production right now.
Been another licensing issue.
Yeah, they hurried the licensing process for the retailers without making sure there was supply for those retailers. So they're working to get retailers licensed, but
They will be equal distribution and paying rent per year before they actually making.
yeah. So more and more people are getting licensed, but it's going to be a while.
One indication that we got was that they thought when closer to the fall, when some of the outdoor
They're not getting licensed.
yeah,
We're a producer processor. I get 3 or 4 calls an hour. My phone was listed with the Liquor Control Board, so when they send out that list, my phone number goes with it and says we're a tier 3 producer processor that's licensed. And yeah, they're all pretty desperate. We're talking to a lot of producers and processors right now because we're a processor. There'll be about 3 or 4 big grows that got their license in time, and they're going to be up. But most of the outdoors are hurting. There'll probably be about 20 that actually have a significant boost in product, and then there'll be a little blip.
Yeah. Well, they're counting on that. So that's what it sounded like anyway.
Yeah. And then I would say in August, the amount of indoor that's out there is going to about double. And then in September, the amount it's going to double again. So there will be more. There won't be enough.
Still take a while to get it synchronized and balanced. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Greg. Once again, this is what I love about this organization. The reality is that we are the ones who actually know how to do our job. And the way that our system is worked, as humans have built it, is that there are people that we don't talk to on a daily basis that run these regulatory bodies and make these decisions. How this organization works, we all pay dues. That money gets put into a funnel, and then basically we as an organization democratically choose what those resources do. And the reason that we all come here together is there are power in numbers. So working with someone like Craig, any other lobbies to get our needs taken care of at the legislative level is really why we're all here today. So once again, Craig, thank you for giving us your time.